At 10, will she or won't she be able to stand at the general election? Diane Abbott's future as a Labour MP hangs in the balance. Attending a rally of supporters tonight, she said the party wants her out.
They haven't given a reason for banning me. They just want me excluded from Parliament.
Also tonight, investigators say the Singapore Airlines flight that hit severe turbulence, leading to the death of a man, dropped 178 feet in less than 5 seconds. Jurors in Donald Trump's hush money criminal trial in New York end their first day of deliberations. And up and away, the battle of the balloons between North and South Korea.
On BBC London, a sharp rise in the number of young girls and teens sexually targeted on our transport network. And the Evening Standard is cut to just once a week.
Hello. There's still confusion tonight over whether the long-serving MP, Diane Abbott, can stand for Labour at the general election. Her suspension from the party ended last night following comments on race that she made in a letter to a newspaper last year. But she told supporters in East London this evening that Labour wants her excluded from Parliament. A claim Sir Keir Starmer says isn't true. Joe Pike has our top story.
At the last election, she was Labour's pick to be Home Secretary.
Please stand!
This time round, Diane Abbott may not be allowed to run for the party at all.
They just want me excluded from Parliament. So what happened? What happened to political independence?
But talking of independence, it's unclear if she has a plan B.
Will you stand as an independent, Diane?
What's your message to Keir Starmer?
This morning, she told the BBC, "I am banned from standing as a Labour candidate." It took almost 5 hours until that was officially challenged.
No, that's not true. No decision has been taken to bar Diane Abbott. The process that we were going through ended with the restoration of the whip the other day. So she's a member of the Parliamentary Labour Party. And no decision has been taken barring her.
This row has been rumbling for more than a year after the veteran MP said Jewish, Irish and traveller people do not face racism all their lives. She apologised but was suspended and only readmitted as a Labour MP last night. Over decades, Diane Abbott built a reputation as a passionate and outspoken politician, but almost always from the back benches. It was only with the assent of her friend and ally Jeremy Corbyn that she got close to power, reaching the shadow cabinet in 2015, nearly 30 years after her historic arrival in Parliament.
As Britain's first black woman MP.
But since Keir Starmer took over, she's been consistently critical of him on social media. Among Diane Abbott's constituents, some say it's time to go.
I think she has the opportunity to retire with dignity on what is a very significant record. I personally would like the opportunity to vote for a different Labour candidate.
While at tonight's Stand for Diane rally, others are unhappy with the Labour leader.
What do you think of how Keir Starmer has handled this?
I'm disappointed with him as a leader. As I said, I would really like to be behind him, but this has made me just a bit shaky.
It's like a set-up. He's been very evasive. He's treated her appallingly with total lack of respect.
Safe seats like this are rarely of interest in a general election. The Diane Abbott row has changed that. Some within the party argue today's confusion has been damaging and distracting from their key campaign messages. Others say it supports Keir Starmer's key argument that over the last 5 years, Labour has changed. The final decision on Diane Abbott's future lies with the party's national executive.
Will you stand as an independent?
But for now, her journey representing this community could soon come to an end. Joe Pike, BBC News, Hackney.
Junior doctors in England will be taking industrial action again just a week before the election. The 5-day strike will begin at 7 a.m. on June the 27th and end early on Tuesday the 2nd of July. That's just 2 days before people go to the polls. Now it means there'll be thousands more hospital appointments and treatments cancelled. It's their 11th strike since March last year, as Hugh Pym reports.
It started in March last year. Junior doctors in England out on strike in their dispute over pay. By the summer, walkouts were continuing, but for a time, with talks underway, there were hopes of a settlement. By February this year, with the 10th strike, the dispute wasn't settled. Then came mediation talks, they failed, and another strike has been called.
The government walked away and collapsed talks. There was nothing more that we could do to be able to have those talks with them because they refused. And so now we're asking, if they're not going to talk to us, to make a public commitment that gives the confidence in our committee that there is a plan for pay restoration.
What do we want? Pay restoration! When do we want it? Now!
By pay restoration, the BMA mean a 35% increase phased in to compensate for inflation over more than a decade. The government said that wasn't reasonable and awarded an average 9% last year. The Health Secretary Victoria Atkins had this response to the Doctors' Union.
I'm angry. We know that industrial action last year had the impact that 1.4 million appointments were cancelled as a result of strikes. And to call this strike now, during a general election campaign, I think shows very cynical politicisation.
Out in Sheffield today, there was a mixed view of the junior doctors' strike plan.
I really support what they're doing in many ways, but I think they'll have to be careful that it doesn't backfire on them.
Why would you upset the apple cart when you don't know who's going to have the reins of power to make the decisions in your favour a few weeks hence?
If now, when are people going to listen? You know, they're doing it for a reason, for unfair pay and stuff.
Labour said the chaos would continue under the Conservatives, but what would they do to resolve the dispute?
That 35% pay claim is not one that I would be able to meet on July the 5th. I'd be willing to sit down and negotiate because the journey back to fair pay is exactly that. It's going to be a journey, not an event. So let's work together on pay.
The Liberal Democrats said ministers were to blame for the continuing dispute.
It's the patients who I really fear for. The fact is that the Conservatives have had months, if not years, to resolve all of these strikes, and the fact that strikes are happening yet again just shows that they're leaving our NHS in a state of crisis and chaos.
Whoever forms the next government will have to try to find a way forward and get talks going again, and possibly consider finding a different kind of offer. Junior doctors in Wales and Northern Ireland are in disputes with devolved administrations. Hospitals in England, meanwhile, are preparing to close operating theatres and cancel appointments on the next strike days. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
Rishi Sunak has been campaigning in southwest England, saying the Conservatives would replace what he calls rip-off university degrees to fund 100,000 new apprenticeships a year. The southwest is a key battleground, and this map shows the current state of the parties in the region, which is dominated by Tory blue. Some constituency boundaries will change at the election, and Chris Mason has been travelling today with the Prime Minister.
Bodmin in Cornwall, 1 week into the general election campaign. And the verdict from some folk here?
It's okay, really. I think it's a good idea to have it.
They're looking for your vote, of course, but I just think they're fighting with each other and it's ridiculous.
What do you make of the whole election fun and games?
It's a total nightmare. I can't bear it. I cannot watch television. It's just dreadful.
You can't be telling me you're not watching television.
I'm trying not to.
Planes and policies, trains and yet more trains. The Prime Minister arriving in Penzance this morning, not looking too rough after a night on the sleeper from London. First stop, a rail maintenance depot to talk up his idea on apprenticeships in England.
A future Conservative government will take the bold action of closing down underperforming university degrees that are letting our young people down, and instead using that money to fund 100,000 new high-quality apprenticeships. Oh, literally 2 weeks ago.
Meet, greet, talk and move on is the rhythm for all the party leaders out and about.
It is lunchtime. This is Liskeard. And the Prime Minister is arriving at a local broadband company.
heard you're a bit of an expert anyway.
Having a go at other people's jobs, all part of many a visit. And listen out for the generous job offer, depending how things turn out.
Yeah, that was a perfect slice if you're looking for a job in telecom.
Yeah. There we go. The winding road to the 4th of July polling day still has plenty around the corner, and where every announcement prompts a flurry of reaction as each party seeks to undermine the others.
Our message that the Conservatives let people down in the West Country over the health service, over the economy, over things like sewage in the rivers and on our beaches is resonating with people.
The Conservatives have to say, if they're going to announce any policy, how they're going to pay for it. That's what we deliver in the Labour Party, fully funded, fully costed policies, and that's what we expect from the Conservatives.
Of course, in this general election campaign, it's really the cost of the union that's on the table. We've got a cost of living crisis inflicted by Westminster, we've got challenges in relation to Brexit and, of course, austerity policies.
The Prime Minister's made quite a thing of projecting a certain energy. He's hurtled around England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland the first couple of days. Now he's here in the southwest of England, a region teeming with Conservative seats he really needs to cling on to. And after a morning in Cornwall, next it's Devon. Late this afternoon, Rishi Sunak arrived in Dunkeswell at a military vehicle manufacturer to talk to members of staff and to reporters. Prime Minister, there's no doubt you're meeting plenty of people out and about, but are you changing many minds?
Well, look, Chris, you can see we're having a conversation here, but I'm determined to talk to as many people as I can across this country over the remaining weeks of this campaign. That's how I started it, and as you heard, I'm thoroughly enjoying myself. I'm enjoying having conversations with people about the things that matter. Yes, I am changing minds.
The tour for all the party leaders trundles on. Oh, and you can tell the election is getting nearer when you see pictures like this. 5 weeks to go. Chris Mason, BBC News, in Devon.
Well, the Conservative promise of 100,000 more apprentices a year by the end of the next Parliament would be funded by scrapping what they call rip-off university degrees. Branwen Jeffries has more from Birmingham.
Universities in England already have to meet minimum standards, and the regulator can fine them if they don't. The Conservatives want to go further and close down courses that are deemed to be of low value. For the first time, that could include taking graduate earnings into account, and that might squeeze some creative subjects. It's also not clear exactly how much money it would save. There's no limit on the number of university places available in England, so it's up to students what they decide.
I know a lot of people that I know would rather do an apprenticeship than a uni degree.
I believe every single degree has value.
The Conservative skills promise involves creating 100,000 extra apprenticeships a year by the end of the next Parliament. The party says by then it would cost £885 million. Large employers already have to put cash into supporting apprenticeships, but each year around £550 million of that is handed back to the government unspent, raising questions about employers' willingness to get involved in creating new apprenticeships. So for these changes to happen, it requires both students and employers to make different decisions, and that's beyond the control of any government.
Branwen Jeffries, our education editor there. Well, Labour's focus has been on the NHS today and proposals to tackle the huge backlog of patients waiting for treatment in England. The party says if elected within 5 years, that backlog of those waiting more than 18 weeks would be cleared. Sir Keir Starmer unveiled the plan alongside the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting. Dominic Hughes now explains how the proposals might work.
The current waiting list for the NHS in England stands at 7.5 million treatments, and more than 40% of people have been waiting longer than 18 weeks. Well, Labour says that should it win power, it will, within the first year of taking office, offer 40,000 extra appointments every week on top of the 2 million or so that are already happening. And it's going to do this by encouraging the NHS to do more work in the evenings and at the weekends, and by making greater use of the private sector. Labour has also said it would double the number of scanning equipments that are available because people waiting for vital test results are a key logjam in the system. So Labour says its plans will cost £1.3 billion in the first year. So where's this money going to come from? Well, the party says it's going to clamp down on tax dodgers and close loopholes for non-dom taxpayers. But this has been tried before, and experience tells us it's very unclear exactly how much money this can raise and when it will come on stream. There are also key questions around staffing. Not only are there significant shortages in nurses, doctors and other key health workers, but we know that people working in the NHS are burnt out and stressed after an incredibly tough few years. So it's great having all these extra scanners and appointments, but you've got to have the people to make it work.
Dominic Hughes, our health correspondent there. The Labour MP for Brighton Kemp Town, Lloyd Russell Moyle, has been suspended by the party over an allegation about his behaviour. He says he believes it's a vexatious and politically motivated complaint and that he will be fully exonerated. Labour has confirmed a complaint has been received and is being investigated. Right, Chris is here. It's a week since the election was called. Do you detect a quickening of the pace when the campaigning gets continuing and so on?
Yeah, it's notching up. Just a week since it all started. It feels perhaps a little longer than that. But yeah, the pace is quickening, the jeopardy is climbing. And what we're getting now, and we've been reflecting in the last few minutes, is in plenty of the parties, there are the selections before the election, last-minute candidates being picked. Tonight, a slew of announcements from Labour, a sizable crop of figures steeped in the Labour movement and outwardly likely to be loyal to Keir Starmer, selected in seats. Meanwhile, we see that anger, the bitterness, the fury still swirling around Diane Abbott's future. An awkward case study in the anger about anti-Semitism within Labour in the last few years, and also where the left finds itself within the Labour Party now, and the short answer to that is it finds itself marginalised. The Conservatives are doubling down what I think we could call their energy and policy strategy of the first week. In other words, Rishi Sunak hurtling hither and thither and doing that in a very sort of outward sense. The camera's in tow as that happens, grabbing attention as well with new policies. Oh, and talking of the pace quickening, Clive, we get the first of the TV debates taking place next week on Tuesday on ITV, a head-to-head debate. Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer in front of a live audience, and I suspect there will be more where that one comes from.
Indeed. Never mind the pace quickening, the pulse will be quickening too with the debates. All right, Chris, thank you. Chris Mason, our political editor. And if you want to know more about our top story, the row over Diane Abbott's future, Newsnight's where you should be going. And here's Victoria Derbyshire.
Yes, thank you very much, Clive. And as Chris was just saying, the Labour row is deepening tonight beyond Diane Abbott, with others on the left of the party saying they are being barred from standing. So on Newsnight, we ask, is there a purge of the left? We'll speak to one of those candidates live. And what does it say about Keir Starmer's leadership? Plus, as 12 New York jurors begin deliberating in Donald Trump's hush money trial, we'll speak to his former comms chief, Anthony Scaramucci. All that, Newsnight, BBC 2, 10:30, or on the iPlayer.
OK, Victoria, thank you for that. Now we're going to move on now because an initial report has found that a Singapore Airlines flight which hit severe turbulence last week, leading to the death of a passenger, had experienced a rapid change in gravitational forces. The aircraft basically rose and fell dramatically in the space of a few seconds, throwing around passengers who were not wearing seatbelts. The plane then dropped 178 feet in less than 5 seconds. Dozens were badly injured on board the flight from London to Singapore. Here's Katie Austin.
The aftermath of last week's severe turbulence. Today, new details of how the terrifying incident over the south of Myanmar unfolded before the plane diverted to land in Bangkok in Thailand. An analysis of the flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder says the plane probably went through an area of rapidly rising and falling air. Moderate turbulence was followed by the plane unexpectedly rising and the seatbelt signs going on. Then a swift drop, which caused people not wearing seatbelts to become airborne, the report says. When the aircraft went up again, they fell back.
I would say it's the speed of the ups and downs, because
The rapid changes over less than 5 seconds resulted in the plane losing 178 feet in altitude.
If you're strapped into the aircraft, here's my person here, strapped into the aircraft, if there's a sudden drop in altitude, if you're secured to the aircraft, you will drop with it. However, if you're not, as the aircraft suddenly drops, you will stay where you are and the aircraft drops, and that actually results in then heads banging on ceilings, which is exactly what happened.
Dozens were injured and 73-year-old Jeff Kitchen died. Earlier today, Singapore Airlines said 42 passengers were still in Bangkok, 26 of whom were in hospital. The airline said it was committed to supporting crew members and passengers, including covering medical expenses. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Jurors in Donald Trump's criminal trial in New York have ended their first day of deliberations. He's facing 34 counts of falsifying business records to cover up a hush money payment to a porn star before the 2016 presidential election. He denies all the charges. Gary O'Donoghue is outside the court in New York. Gary, while the jury were deliberating, Mr. Trump had to be called back into court.
Yeah, Clive, the jury spent 4 hours and 37 minutes, to be precise, deliberating today. And that's after they heard the instructions from the judge at the beginning of the day. And he told them to ignore various bits of evidence, to only trust their own beliefs about the evidence, not to read or to understand or to look at anything else outside of the court. Now, they went in to deliberate, and then at the end of the day, this buzzer goes off in the court twice. The jury has questions. They want to hear some transcripts reread to them. They're not allowed to have those in the jury room for some reason. And they also want to hear some, or at least all, the instructions that the judge gave them all over again. That took more than an hour this morning. That will all happen tomorrow morning. Donald Trump, for his part, not sounding overly confident about his chances. He said that Mother Teresa wouldn't beat these charges.
All right, Gary, thank you. Gary O'Donoghue there in New York. The mother of Amy Gray, who was 34 when she was killed on a beach in Bournemouth last Friday, has been paying tribute to her daughter. She said Amy, seen here on the left with her wife, was amazing, funny, kind and energetic. A second woman, who was also attacked, suffered serious injuries and remains in hospital. A 20-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder and attempted murder. The former Scottish Health Secretary, Michael Matheson, has been banned from Parliament for a record 27 days for breaching expenses policy. It follows an £11,000 data bill racked up on his parliamentary iPad. He eventually admitted his children had used it to watch football while he was on holiday. His salary will also be withdrawn for 54 days. Criminal charges against the world #1 golfer Scotty Scheffler following his arrest at the USPGA Championships have been dropped. The American was arrested after trying to drive to the tournament in heavy traffic. He'd been charged with various offences, including second-degree assault of a police officer and reckless driving. The owner of Royal Mail has agreed to a £3.6 billion takeover bid from a Czech billionaire. The offer includes commitments to protect the company's public service offering. The deal will still need final approval from the government. Simon Jack's here to tell us more. Simon.
Thank you, Clive. The first owner of Royal Mail was Henry VIII, 500 years ago. 12 years ago, it was split from the post office and privatised. Now, this man wants to be the next owner. Daniel Kretinsky, a reclusive Czech billionaire with stakes in Sainsbury's, West Ham Football Club, and he already owns 27% of Royal Mail's parent company. Now, clearly, this is a very sensitive case, so he is offering some assurances to allay concerns from unions and politicians. And they are to keep the brand, UK headquarters, and keep paying tax in the UK, maintain the one price goes anywhere universal service, and he's promising no compulsory redundancies till 2025. That's in line with the current deal between Royal Mail and the unions. And he said that may be extended with negotiation. That those are time-limited guarantees. But Royal Mail is not in the rudest of health. It made a loss last year of £348 million. It's consistently missed delivery targets, with 74% of first-class letters delivered next day. That's against a target of 93%. It's hit with fines and strikes over the last few years. Now, Mr. Kretinsky says he can improve that performance, and negotiations discussions are already underway about reducing second-class deliveries to every other weekday, which could save the company hundreds of millions of pounds. Now, the government can block this. So far, the Chancellor has said it will be scrutinised, but the current government has no objection in principle. Shadow Business Secretary said the assurances offered are welcome and they would ensure they were adhered to. But unions are uneasy, but not openly hostile, as they say the current owners and management have done a poor job. Any decision on this will fall to whoever is in government after the election.
Simon, thank you. Simon Jack, our business editor there. Now, a volcano in southwestern Iceland has erupted again, sending hot lava 160 feet into the air. These are live pictures of the eruption taking place, and it's the 5th since December on a peninsula near the capital Reykjavik, which has opened a fissure about 1.5 miles long, and it's growing too. The famous Blue Lagoon resort has been evacuated as a wise precaution. Millions of South Africans have been voting in the country's election 30 years since the first democratic poll following the end of apartheid. The ruling African National Congress faces its toughest challenge yet, with widespread disappointment over the state of the economy, corruption and high levels of crime. The ANC could lose its majority in Parliament for the very first time. Anne Soy has the latest from Durban.
Voters endured long hours in the sun, waiting for their turn to cast their ballots. Queues reminiscent of the country's first election after the end of white minority rule. But 3 decades on, many dreams of liberation are still yet to be realized. There's a sense of despondency, particularly among the youth, and that they hope to change.
I'm looking at the lines because I've been voting here for the last 20 years. It has never been like this. It's so exciting.
It's not about a political party. It's about what you're going to bring to the country that we don't have at the moment.
For someone like myself who has a master's degree but is unemployed, so I'm definitely hoping that my today's vote is going to make the difference.
This queue has gone round all the way to the other side of this building. South Africans coming out in their numbers to make their voice heard. This is billed as the most competitive election yet. They have 50-odd parties to choose from. It could be a fragmented vote, but importantly for them, they get to have a say on who has the best solution for their challenges.
This vote is a verdict on President Ramaphosa's record. Under him, the economy has all but stagnated. The decline began with his predecessor, Jacob Zuma, who is now fronting a new breakaway party. Also in the running is the party formed by the controversial former youth leader, Julius Malema. The largest opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, entered a pre-election coalition with smaller parties, hoping to benefit from the ruling ANC's falling fortunes.
I think the best hope for South Africa going forward are actually coalition governments. I don't think one dominant party would serve this country.
That's not something that worries voters. A more competitive election may throw political parties into a spin for now, but ultimately it may strengthen democracy. Anne Soy, BBC News, Durban.
South Korea has warned residents to stay indoors after accusing North Korea of sending giant balloons carrying rubbish across the border. Officials say more than 260 were found, with reports that some were carrying animal waste. Now, it appears to be retaliation for propaganda leaflets sent north on balloons by activists. Shama Khalil has the latest from the South Korean capital, Seoul.
This is what many people here in South Korea found on their streets. Dozens and dozens of these balloons spotted across the country, carrying manure, waste, and all kinds of rubbish, including this empty bottle of detergent and this time-release device. Residents received alerts warning them against leaving their homes and urging them to go to the authorities if they encounter one of the balloons. The army has been deployed with rapid response teams and explosive disposal personnel inspecting the objects. If you're thinking, why on earth would North Korea send these balloons? Well, because it's happened before. Pyongyang says this is in response to the frequent scattering of leaflets in its border areas. The Deputy Defense Minister earlier warned that mounds of rubbish and waste will be strewn in the south, and that the authorities in Seoul will find out what a hassle it is to clean it up.
because of the North Korean attitude, this situation is very concerning, and I'm concerned that this could escalate into a shooting situation.
In recent years, South Korean activists have been sending balloons carrying anti-Pyongyang leaflets, like the ones in this video from 2016. And just this month, an activist group sent 20 balloons with about 300,000 leaflets, as well as USB sticks loaded with K-pop music. This has been the most talked about story here. The fear is that in an increasingly tense Korean peninsula, things can take a much more sinister turn than just retaliatory littering. Shaima Khalil, BBC News, Seoul.
Well, you certainly can't be putting up balloons in our weather of late. Louise?
Well, here's a question for you, Clive. When was the last time we had a week of dry, settled weather right across the country?
A long time.
A long time, you're quite right. January, actually. January, and I can tell you that we are going to see a week of dry, settled weather from the weekend onwards. Something to look forward to. Today we had a warm day in Surrey, 21 degrees actually, but not everywhere. Some real contrasting weather conditions. Actually, we're heading for the wettest spring on record across parts of eastern Scotland, and we saw some sharp thundery downpours today, which moved their way down into Sunderland. Let's take a look at those thunderstorms over the last few hours, really stretching down through Edinburgh, down into Newcastle. Some heavy, sharp showers, some rumbles of thunder and lightning as well. They're going to continue to push their way steadily southwards overnight tonight. There'll be a bit of a nuisance into the southeast of England, and I think tomorrow. So behind it, it's going to be a relatively mild start to the day. Double digits quite widely across the country, but there will be some sharp showers. A brisk northerly wind driving the showers further south. So we will see some across the East Midlands into East Anglia, South East England. Again, maybe the odd rumble of thunder by the time we get into the afternoon. Drier and brighter conditions out to the west, but still pretty breezy. So with a little more shelter, that's where we'll see the best of the warmth. Around 18 or 19, maybe 20 degrees if we're lucky. But a cooler story along that exposed east coast. But high pressure is building, and once it arrives, it is going to stay with us. Now, don't get too excited to begin with, because we will be chasing cloud amounts around, particularly coming in off the North Sea. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. But ultimately, it's a dry story right across the country. So dry with some sunny spells from time to time, and temperatures will gradually climb up to highs of 22 degrees. Clive.
All right, Louise, thank you. That's it. Now, let's join our news teams for all the news where you are. Have a very good night.